Hey everyone, welcome back to my garage. My name is Paul, and tonight we are going to be working on the next section of this cribbage, round cribbage set. Where we left off last time was we were just painting those playing pieces, and next we're going to just be adding the magnet to make sure that the drawer stays shut, and we're going to be doing quite a few other things, so stick around. Alright, we're going to go ahead and knock out this magnet thing. So I've got two of the little bitty magnets right here. And what I'm going to mark is, what's important to me is the two ends that connect to each other. So there's a south pole and a north pole on one of these. So I'm going to mark one end, because really all I care about is what's showing on either end. So that is that end on that one. Take that off and mark this side, and I'm just going to double check one more time that the two marked faces are facing each other, so the two clean faces are away from each other. That's good for now. Now I'm going to mix up just a little bit of two-part epoxy here. I really just need a tiny little dab on either end. And mix it thoroughly. This is like a 90-second epoxy, so I don't have a whole lot of work time, but I'm only doing two little tiny dabs where I'm actually sticking them. So I only need a tiny dab. The reason I'm using epoxy and not wood glue is because wood glue sticks to wood, and that's just about it. Wood glue does not like to stick to other things. Shoot. Alright, looks like I'm going to have to stick this in there by hand. Okay, so I got my marker side showing on that end. I'm going to take this end, which the wood glue is still drying from the last step. Stick some epoxy down in there. Alright, and now with our shiny side showing, make sure our shiny side is what's showing over here. Nope, good thing I checked. Marker side showing. So we want our marker side showing on this one as well. Okay. See that? Marker side up. And marker side up. So now we know that those ends will stick together and not repel. This has been drying for about a half hour, but I'm still going to leave it on there just for a few more minutes. In the meantime, we do have a little bit of a snipe issue going on, because again my belt sander was just a nightmare, and so we've got a little bit of snipe here and here. I'm not sure if that's showing up on camera. Actually, yeah, you can see that pretty well. So I'm going to take this to the belt sander and try to knock this down. Alright, that's pretty good. Now I had to sand against the grain, which I've told you guys before you never ever want to do, but I'm gonna hit this all with the Palm ROS a lot to do the final sand, and so these cross grain things are gonna go away. And well, you know what? Why don't we do ourselves a favor? I'm gonna sand it again in the right direction, and that'll reduce what we have to do with the palm sander later on. There we go. So now our sanding marks are going in this direction, so we don't have to take quite as much off with the palm sander for the final sand. I'm going to go ahead and blow these out also. Blow out all these holes. Well, I'll probably just blow them out at the end, because they're just going to get full up of sawdust again. So we're up at about 35 minutes on this joint here, so we may be okay. Let me go ahead and take a look. Let's take these off. I'm just going to gently... Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Let's grab our drawer. See how our drawer fits on. Make sure we didn't totally mess up. Oh yeah, it's a little bit tight, but it's probably some glue squeeze out. That's the problem. That's pretty nice. I'm very happy with that. And also our epoxy should be, yep, the epoxy's wanting to hold the drawer shut. That's probably what the resistance I'm feeling. All right. Well, that works very well, and there's actually very little squeeze out. I'll probably hand sand this just a little bit here. And I can use my fingernail to try to get in that little groove. I'm going to hand sand that just to kind of make it look a little nicer too. But we are on a good track here, my friends. All right, a little bit of hand sanding here and there, and it slides pretty easily. It's a little bit tight, but I think it's okay for right now. On the final fit, I'm gonna sand it down a little more, but I would like to get to the next step tonight, and I think we're plenty ready to get there. So the next step is that we need to make this bottom half, including the drawer, fit the top half. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to tape this down so that this sits right where it needs to stay, and then we're going to cut this out on the bandsaw, rough cut, and then we'll use a flush trim router bit to match the bottom to the top. So first, let's tape this down. I'm going to kind of go crazy on the tape because I really don't want this to move at all when we're cutting, or else it can cause some real problems for us. I really need this drawer to stay in place exactly while we're cutting it, because if it gets off, then the whole thing's going to be messed up. It's going to be really not good. Just a little more just because I'm paranoid. Alright, so let's take this over to the bandsaw and chop out a rough cut around this. Alright, well there we go. We have it chopped down to very close to the profile that we want. I think I need to change the blade on my bandsaw just because it was having a little bit of a hard time getting through that material and it was wandering a little bit on me. For this next step, we're going to use what's called a flush trim bit. So this sits in the router like that. There's a ball bearing here that's the same radius and diameter as the cutting blades. Flush trim bit will follow our bottom that we already know is what we want it to be, and it'll clean the top up to exactly the same dimensions. There we go, and now our edges line up almost perfectly in the whole thing. So a little bit of a lip there, but I'm gonna run the whole thing over the disc sander anyway and smooth that out. I found that if I rotate the piece as I'm sanding, that it gets a little bit more of a smoother, more round profile. So let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. Alright, we are starting to have what looks like a thing. So you can kind of see the grand design now. Top playing surface, the drawer that'll come out. Still have the tape on there. I had to go back and do a few passes on the router with the flush trim bit just to get that nice and smoothed out. I still have some gaps that I think I'm going to fill in with some just wood filler, just to make it look a little bit nicer, and then I can sand that off. I really wish that wouldn't have happened, but something went way out of whack with my planer, and that's what caused this problem in the first place. We still have some imperfections here along the edges, and then there's you know, some burn marks here that can get sanded out, but also the imperfections on the edge itself. I'm going to put a little bit of a roundover bit, maybe an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch roundover on the top and bottom. I can only go so far because I don't want to mess up the playing knobs right there, or the holes. But I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and fill these gaps with a wood filler and let it sit overnight, and then we will keep working at it tomorrow. I went ahead and removed the tape and the drawer just because the glue is going to be drying for about 24 hours on these slides, and I don't want to risk getting my drawer glued in because then we'd be completely screwed. So anyway, I've got some wood filler. I've been told that this wants to dry out very, very easily, so you don't keep it in a warm spot. Like my garage has been probably 110 to 120 degrees over the summer. So and also keep it dry. So I put it in a Ziploc inside, in a drawer inside. So let's see if it's gonna work for us. Yeah, it's being kind of a butthead. So I'm gonna go find all my spots and just fill these gaps here. And the reason why I use this stuff is that this plastic wood, it will take a stain, so it'll match the rest. And it's only gonna be a thin strip right down the middle. So, all right, well, you guys don't need to watch this whole thing. I'm just gonna be filling in gaps. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this and let it sit overnight. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, so it's been about 2 days since we put this sealer in there, or the filler. So we'll go ahead and see how that worked out. And obviously did not put it here because that's where the drawer slides out. So that hopefully turned out well. We're going to sand that up, and may also go ahead and do some sanding on the bottom here. I think I may want to put a little bit of a drawer pull, because there's just a flat surface if you want to pull the drawer out. So I may need to figure how I want to put a drawer pull in there. And also our playing pieces, our nails, colored nails, turned out okay. They're not, I mean, they were never going to be super beautiful or anything, but I think they're going to serve their purpose. We may end up wanting to trim them down because they're going to stick out quite a ways. So I may chop those off to be a little bit shorter, but that'll probably be one of the last things that we do. So first, let's go ahead and sand off this this filler and see what we got. All right, we got the bulk of it off with that. So now I'm going to do a little hand sanding and see how far back I want to take this and how much I want to leave. Get a little better feel for it when I'm doing it slower with the hand sanding. This filler will take a stain. However, like especially right here where there's the dark walnut, I don't necessarily want a brighter colored stain in between. But I also don't want a gap, so I may have to make a little bit of a compromise there. There's also a little bit of burns here just from poor cuts. Probably taking too long on the bandsaw, again because I probably should have changed the blade. But it's all a learning experience, and hopefully it'll just kind of add to the character of this. I'm also going to, like I said, do a round over bit, round over with the router on here to take off a little bit of this, so I'm not doing the complete final sand right now. I'm just kind of cleaning up this gap, and it's looking pretty good, it's feeling pretty good. There's a really nasty burn right there. That's probably not going to go away, because if I sand deep enough to get rid of the burn, then I'm going to totally get rid of the roundness. So it's all it's a learning experience, and hopefully just adds to the character of the piece. So I think that looks pretty good. So I want to figure out what I want to do in order to get a little bit of a divot right here. I think I might do it with the Dremel, just because I can't think of a good way to do it with a router or some other tool, and I just need a little bit of a lip right there. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of talk myself through this here. So what we're going to do to make sure that our pull is level across here is I'm just going to trace these lines up from the edges here. Two lines. And then I think I want it to be about, yeah, that's about right. So a ½ inch from either end. Do this, and then I will do this, and then just connect the lines. And now what I have is a straight line. And so I'm just gonna, I think I'm gonna use a Dremel piece and just kind of put a shallow groove in there, just to give it again a little a little bit to pull on the drawer here. Now I haven't done the final sand across this bottom piece, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper than I normally would. A little deeper than I want it to be because, again, when I sand it, it's going to be a little bit more shallow. So here we go. That's about as deep as I want it to be, so I think I'm going to take a 1, 2, 3 block, which has a perfectly straight edge, and I'm going to wrap some sandpaper over it and just work back and forth to hopefully smooth out these edges a little bit. Just kind of sitting down in that groove with the straight spot, and I don't have a whole lot of room to move back and forth, so it's going to be a little bit of work, but let's see how this works out. I'm hoping it'll evenly wear both sides of this groove. I think that's looking pretty good. It's not absolutely perfect. There's probably a smarter way to do that. Again, if you guys have suggestions, please let me know in the comments how you would do it better. So our goal was to have a nice little pull, and I think we've accomplished that. The drawer is feeling a little bit stiff still, and I don't think it's just the magnet. So I think I'm going to sand down these edges a little bit, and I'm also going to take down, I'm going to start by taking down these rails just a little bit. I don't want to get too aggressive on the rails because that's what holds the drawer in. But if that's what's making it stiff, then we gotta sacrifice a little bit. Okay, we're in better shape now. Took down a few different spots where there were problems, and now it's sliding nicely. I also widened this piece out, or this little grab out again, and sanded it over again. So I'm pretty happy with the drawer now. You kind of have to help it along on the back side with both hands, but I think that's just the nature of not being on a... I think if we went too far, then it'd just want to be falling out. So I think that's going to be pretty good. So next I want to retape this. I'm going to tape this back down, and then we can put our round over around the edges on the bottom and the top. So because I'm going to do it on the top too, I don't want to get too close to these holes. So I'm probably going to go with a pretty shallow round over bit. I'll have to look and see what I've got. But step number one is to tape this down. So when we run this through the router, there's going to be an awful lot of torque pushing one way or the other on this drawer on the bottom end. And so that's why I've taped the crap out of it, just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. I think I'm going to peel this tape away from the edges just so it doesn't affect where our bit goes. I don't think it will, but just to be safe, I just don't want it to be too close to the edge there. All right, let's go over to the router. All right, we've hit a little bit of a snag because this is the smallest round over bit that I have with a bearing, which is, I'm going to need a bearing on this situation. But here's the thing, if I line it up with the bearing, you can see that it comes very dangerously close to the holes, and I really don't want to tear out those holes. Like, that would just be a disaster at this point. We're getting very close to the end, and that would just be a nightmare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 45-degree bevel, and this is how it works. It's going to just ride right there, and then depending on how high I set this is how much of a bevel it'll take off. So I'm going to set it to just take off a little bit, just to kind of give it a little bit of character, and that way we just barely touch the lip on the top and on the bottom. So let's go ahead and get this loaded up in the router and get going. Now I always like to run a test piece through before I put my actual piece, my work piece through. So I just got some scrap here I'm going to run through and make sure I like that bevel. Alright, so that might be a little bit too slight. So I think I'm going to raise the bit just a little bit. And because I'm recutting deeper than I would before, I can recut this same side of my sample piece. That's okay. I think I'm going to go just a hair more. Like maybe half as much as I just raised it. That's exactly what I was looking for. So it's kind of hard to tell the scale on camera, but I think that's going to be the perfect amount of bevel for our piece. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. There we go. Nice bevel on the top and bottom. Now it's tough to learn when you're first starting out with a router. If you go too slow, then you can burn the piece really badly, and I've done that before. It's a little tiny bit of burn right there, probably when I was changing my hands, but overall I think that looks really, really nice. I'm very happy with that. The other thing is I made sure not to stop or start where there's a change in the wood, where the lamination ends or begins, because that's where our biggest chance for tear out is going to be. But overall I think that looks really nice. So I think we're just about ready for a final sand. So I think I'm going to go back to the random orbital sander, and there's some like dirt spots on here, scuff marks from when we've been working, and try to clean this up. And I think we're getting very close to the end, folks. As you can see, those bevels turned out really nicely. Turns out knowing how to use a router properly has been a very, very, very valuable experience. That's one of those things that I had to learn the hard way. I burned a lot of really good pieces of wood on the projects that I had made, but luckily this one turned out really well. Next, we're just going to be doing the final sand in the next part of the video. Again, this is part of a series. So go over and check out the playlist for this piece of this round cribbage board that we're making. Leave comments in the section below. Like I always say, let me know how you would do it better next time around, because I may make this again and I'd like to know how to do it better. This whole channel is all about me learning from my mistakes and hopefully you learning from my mistakes as well. Stick around, because the next piece of the video is going to be our final home stretch, and it's a shorter video. And we're going to see the final product. So thanks very much for watching. Have a great night.